So we're getting ready for, I think it's evening 4 at the Dunedin Fine Arts Center. And we're talking about bottles again, still. So the first night we did throwing the necks and the bodies separately, and then we did throwing a cylinder and preparing the piece for reserving the right amount of clay for the neck. Third evening we threw a slightly exaggerated form with the neck, so the bottle's thrown all in one piece. And so tonight we're going to do the exact same thing as we did on night 3. It's just that we are going to exaggerate the form a little bit more. And my friend Adi from Israel told me that when I use the hairdryer, just knock out the sound of the hairdryer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do that a little bit, but I don't think I can do that completely. So I've centered, opened, and I pulled my cylinder, and after my second pull it gets a little wonky, and I'm going to just go ahead and use my square rib. And I'm going to first remove this apron off the outside. That really scrapes off quite a bit of clay, and I'm going to put that in my slip bucket, and then just keep working on this and just scraping off a little bit of clay. Now what I want to do, this whole step is really to just compress the wall and take out some of that wiggle. I just want just a tiny bit of water in there. I'm just going to put it on the top, and then I trace it down so that the whole cylinder on the inside is damp but not soaking wet. Alright, so I'm going to put this on the outside, and the inside hand is pushing the clay up against that square rib. Notice the rib is not moving. And the inside hand is pretty much just flat. I don't want to use the tips of my fingers because I don't want to put additional rings in. So I'm really doing kind of like a double rib pull, but my inside hand is acting as the rib, compressing this wall, and now I'm moving the rib and my hand up together. The reason I can do that now is it's easy for me to move this square corner away. If I'm at the bottom like this and I start moving the rib up, that square corner is going to make gouges in the side. So first, leave the rib right where it is. When you get to the top, you can tilt the rib out and continue to compress the rest of the wall. Alright, so now this is where we are going to reserve that much clay for the neck. Actually, it's really the shoulder and neck, but I still want to compress it. Oops. Alright, so now that I have it compressed, I'm going to give it just a little bit of shape. We did this on the last one. Clear down to the bottom. Now I'm going to tilt my rib out, and I'm going to push the clay up against that square rib. And notice the wall is pretty straight because the strongest line is a straight line. Now we're going to go around the corner. And on the inside, my hand is like this, and I'm pulling the clay up. You know, this pressure point is right here, so it's still relatively flat, but my hand is up under this lump, so I'm not just pushing it out, I'm pulling it up and compressing it at the same time. Okay. So my goal is to get all the marks out of the side of the cylinder, give it a little bit of shape, and now that I've opened it up a little bit, if you look at the inside, there's probably a little bit of water in there, and so I want to first take that out before I continue to shape it, because I don't want that resting in there. It just soaks into the bottom. So here we go. Now this is when I would start drying the bottom, so I'm going to try to avoid that. We'll also use one of my metal ribs here to compress this top part, and I'm allowing it to kind of go around the contour of that rib, giving it some shape. There is some thickness at the top, so as I'm stretching this out into shape, this body is going to get thinner and thinner and thinner. That's why it's important to have this hair dryer at the bottom. So sorry, Adi, I'm going to have a hair dryer down here at the bottom, and this is going to dry the bottom out so that as I'm stretching this, it's going to support what I'm doing up here, all the tension or the drag that I'm applying to the piece on the inside. So I point the hairdryer right at the bottom to stabilize the form, so as I'm expanding the piece from the inside, that the bottom of the piece will be able to stand up to all that torquing and twisting that's going on the inside. So I take the flexible rib and I put it at the base, and I want to give just a little bit of shape to the piece before I put the wooden rib on the inside. So I'm really kind of compressing, smoothing, and even pulling the clay just a little bit. If I were to just expand the piece and not lift it at the same time, the piece would just kind of shrink. And you've probably seen that before. When you push the clay out, it just kind of shrinks. So at this point, I could actually just close up the top and throw a nice bottle. But this evening, I want to do something a little more exaggerated in terms of the form. So I'm going to continue to push this out and make it much more bulbous. So if you look at the inside, you can see the floor really blends into the wall. We want to really focus on the inside shape so that when we trim the outside to a nice perfect shape, that it's going to reflect what's happening on the inside. Sometimes I'll use a little extra heat with a torch in addition to the hairdryer, which is going on the side, just to give it a little more strength. So I'm going to take that wooden rib on the inside, I'm going all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to push that out and blend it into the side. So here we go. If you look at the side, you can really see what's happening. So I push it out, kind of makes a little lump at the side, and then I blend that into the rest of the form. So I do it kind of gradually, I don't do it all at once. So with this first pass, I'm just pushing it gently into the shape that I want. So that actually kind of created what we call the bottom bowl. Remember, I mentioned that we're kind of creating two bowls that are stacked rim to rim. So I'm going to take that round part of the rib and I'm going to put it in the fat part of that belly, and I'm going to continue to push it up. I'm pushing out and up at the same time, so I'm kind of gaining height and width, and it's thinning that wall so that it's nice and uniform. So as I'm pushing this into shape, the walls are getting thinner and thinner. So you'll have to be the judge in terms of how much clay is available, but in this case I'm going to try to push it a little bit more and bring it out and make the belly a little bit wider. So here we go. So you can see that there's a little lump at the base there, and I'll trim that away later. This is just displacing the extra clay that I didn't pull up into the cylinder. And that's why it's really important to pay attention to the shape that's going on the inside, so you'll know exactly where the extra clay is to trim it away. So again, we've kind of expanded the bottom bowl, and now we're going to turn the rib around and we're going to finish that top bowl. You can see that top part starts to get a little wobbly, but we can take care of that. So I'm just kind of refining the form, just pushing the clay from the inside. Now if you wanted to, you could actually push it a lot more. You just have to pay attention to how much clay you have available. now what I want to do is really stabilize this shoulder, because that's going to want to sit down, and I'm going to stabilize this even further with the torch. And what I found that's helpful is you're going to want it to dry really fast, but count to 10 before you move the torch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This just helps you move slow and not rush through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now when I get up here, I want to change the direction of my torch so that it's not drying this top part, it's just drying the shoulder. 8, 9, 10. And then I'll just kind of feel this on the inside. You can feel if it's really hot on the inside, you know it's ready to go. But if it's nice and wet and cool on the inside, you need a little more heat. Okay, so I can feel the heat. Now I'm going to disperse that heat and accelerate the evaporation by just adding a little air. So drying it to this point, it's not quite leather hard, but it's dry enough to where it's going to hold its shape a little bit better, but you can still come in and push this up with the rib if you'd like. So I'm going to go in and push this up just a tiny bit. Okay. Now I'm going to focus on bringing that clay in at the top and creating the neck. So this is where we might use slip instead of water. I'm going to be working right here, so I'm just going to apply the slip right here at the top. And then I'm going to just support this with a sponge and get a little more water on the sponge. And then I'm just going to use my thumb to push this up. I'm not trying to make it thinner, I'm trying to change the direction of the wall. So see how that's flat now? Now I can come out to the outside and collar this in, and it just works so much better. It's not fighting the process of being collared. And then this part here, we said this is kind of one of those trouble areas. If you don't get this under control right now, it's going to be a real problem for you. So we're going to compress it with the rib. I can find it. This will work. So I put my hands on the inside, and I'm just going to compress this right here, and I'm really almost pulling it with my finger on the inside and the rib on the outside. Okay, and so if our fingers can't get all the way in there, we will use a throwing stick, which we all got. You put the rib on the surface and you use your throwing stick to push the clay up to the rib. Keith is the one holding the camera, and he will tell you that if you put the rib on the surface, you're going to end up flattening the shoulder.
Push it down.
So I'm going to...
easy.
There we go. Push it into the rib. There's that little bump right there. You'll see it's right there. Okay, that wasn't... No, that's good enough. Okay, now I'm going to dry this area that I just finished. We're going to just stabilize it a bit. Okay, now we can do the same thing where we're going to put some slip on here and on the inside. And I'm just going to tip this over at the top And I can come down here and speed up the wheel a bit and just really collar that in. Just like that. All right, so now I'm going to go down as far as I can, and I'm going to try to pull some of this thickness out of this shoulder and transition area. I'm pulling it into the neck so the thickness goes right up into the neck there. All right, just keep an eye on what's happening to the shoulder. You can always push this down, but usually what happens is if you push this down now just to get the form, as the piece is drying, this part is just going to pop right up. So we'll end up trimming some of this shoulder nice and clean when we're ready. It's leather hard. And now we're going to, oh, that's a phone ringing. Just ignore it. Kind of goes with the movement. All right, so I want to pull this really thin and then collar it. So collar it. And remember, we're pulling it up. So you narrow it, change the direction of your fingers, and pull it up. We'll pull it one more time, and then we'll do a more aggressive collar. And this is, we talked about where if you want to flare it or have a different style neck on the top, this is where you would do that. And then you would shape the top and then collar the neck under it. So what I want to do here is, this is my first stick pull. I just use a bamboo skewer on the inside, and I'm going to put my thumb, my two fingers out here just to steady the neck, and my thumb is the pulling surface. And I'm just going to use the stick to push up against my thumb and then move all that up. So see if you can see that. So the stick goes in, pushes up against my thumb. I'm going to move that all up to the top. Okay. And it usually takes a bunch of stuff off the inside. Clean that off, work on the top. All right, now we're going to do a more aggressive collar and pull. And what I like to do is, you can use the brush, but if you don't have a brush, just put moisture on the rim and then just trace that moisture down with your two fingers. And do that as many times as it takes to get the full neck covered. But you want to, don't put so much on it that's going to run down the side of the piece. All right, so here we go. We're going to squeeze in aggressively and then pull that up. So you saw it doing a little dance on the way up. Just try to ignore that. Okay, so we're going to do one pull here. And I'm not pulling aggressively, just mainly just trying to even out the neck. Okay. And try this one more time. And we'll push that collar down. I'm going to pull right up here at the top first. And then go back down. And I'm just wanting to straighten this out on the neck here a little bit. So a lot of this wiggle can be trimmed out at the leather hard stage.
So you wouldn't cut it off?
You're talking here, I'm talking the wiggle here.
I see.
Yeah, I wouldn't cut the top off either. So anytime you're touching the neck, you want to stabilize the neck by touching the top there. Okay, so one aggressive collar and then we should be done. You have to make funny faces when you're doing it too. Although I'm not making one now. All right, so I always talk about how important it is to dry this. We're gonna push this down. Right here you can see there's quite a bit of a bump. So I'm gonna stabilize the top, not right at the tippy top, but right about here. And I'm gonna try to push this down so I have a nice transition from the shoulder to the neck. And like I said, we'll just push it down. It's gonna pop up anyway, and then we'll trim it later to be more perfect. Oops. All right, so yeah, this is having some problems. Oh, man. Stop. If your fingers get really dry and sticky, that's what happens.
Catches.
It catches and it starts to pull the neck over. But I panicked. You need plenty of moisture on the neck. And then we're going to start to dry this so that it's much more stable. I'm going to hold the top in place with one finger. And then all of this can be fine-tuned later. And so I wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but we can trim that nice and clean. We can trim those little marks out of there. And while it's upright, so you can see a nice exaggerated form, I like to trim away as much clay as I possibly can so that I have very little to do once I turn it upside down. Also, at this point, I know where the extra clay is, so I can easily trim that away. There's a little bump there. And because we've stretched this so much, I think you'll be surprised at how light it is when you take it off. You don't want to throw it thinking, all right, I'm going to be stretching it into shape so I can throw really thick. You want to throw kind of your normal thickness and then stretch it into shape, and then that will establish a nice thin-walled bottle. Okay, so again, I'm leaving a lot of extra clay down here at the bottom for trimming, but that is pretty much it. So we'll see you tonight at 5 p.m. Between 5 and 6, you can catch up on what you were doing last week, but the class starts at 6 o'clock, goes till 9 o'clock, and the demonstration will be at 6 o'clock. So we'll see you then.